This episode is very kindly sponsored by our friends at Simon & Schuster. Thank you so much for supporting the Book Nook podcast. Hey readers, welcome back to the Book Nook, the cozy corner for readers who love to dive deep into all things books. Whether you're all about annotating your paperbacks, obsessed with audiobooks, or can't stop scrolling through Book Talk, we're here to chat about everything bookish. I'm Desiree.
And I'm Cameron.
And together we're on the community and editorial teams at Fable, the free app for finding, reading, tracking, and chatting about books.
We are so excited for today's episode because we get to chat with Jaysea Lynn, the author of For Whom the Bell Tolls, which we'll refer to as Belle for short, which was released this week. In fact, there's something really exciting taking place on Fable today. If you're interested in getting the chance to win one of 100 ebook copies of Belle, run. Do not walk to Fable to enter the giveaway book club. All you have to do is join the club, which we've linked in the description for you, and leave a comment in the kickoff. That's it. You're automatically entered.
It's like the easiest thing to do. It's super quick, and you get the chance to read a really fun book with a bunch of amazing people. And speaking of amazing people, the moderator is Sloan. If anyone's familiar with the Crow Club on Fable or Sloan and Kyrie on TikTok, that is the very same Sloan. We love her. She's amazing. And the giveaway runs from May 6th until May 13th, when winners are going to be selected at random. You're going to get to read this funny, slightly spicy romantasy with all the club and Sloan, and you're not going to want to miss it, honestly. So make sure that you download the app and go put that comment in the kickoff in the club.
If you want to know a little bit more about the author, Jaysea Lynn is a dynamic storyteller whose contemporary fantasy romance brand stands out for its unique blend of humor, heart, and spice. As the mastermind behind the captivating universe, go follow her on TikTok or Instagram to see these skits. She combines the best of digital storytelling with literary publishing. It's truly such a unique origin story, and she creates narratives that resonate deeply with her audience.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Jaysea. We're so excited to chat about all things For Whom the Bell Tolls.
I'm very, very happy to talk about everything For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Amazing. So before we jump into the more author book interview questions, we have our get to know you segment. So our first question is if you have any kind of bookish hot take or unpopular opinion when it comes to books and reading.
Oh, I'm sure I do. I'm trying to think of things that are actually hot take and not lukewarm. Probably one is if you buy a book, you should be able to do whatever you want with it. Because I know there's people who are how dare you break the spines or whatever. I'm not a spine breaker, but I had to get over. I'm they paid for the book. It's on their shelf. Who am I to say? I'm going to do with my books what I want to do. But then also, if someone loans you a book, return it in the same condition or try to that it was loaned. But I think my hottest take would probably be you can dislike something and still recognize that it's good, and you can love something and recognize that it's not a masterpiece.
Wait,
art is so subjective, and books are art, and I'm there's books that I hated, but I'm okay, I recognize this is really well written, this is poignant and everything, but I will never touch it again. And there's books that I have adored with my whole heart, and I'm this is cotton candy for my brain, but I like cotton candy, so that's probably my hottest one.
Yeah, I like that, the comparison to cotton candy. Yep, Twilight. Yeah.
You're defending Twilight at every turn.
Well, it's my other one that I was talking about that the other day with a friend was Ice Planet Barbarians. I love Ice Planet Barbarians. Unironically, I've read everything Ruby Dixon has ever written. Do I know that it's not going to be discussed in highbrow literature classes in 5 years? No, it's not, but it didn't stop me from enjoying it. But at the same time, I'm Anna Karenina, I'm not going to read it again. I recognize it was a good, it was a good book, interesting, a lot of work went into it, but it's not my cup of tea. Or give me my cotton candy at that point in my life.
I really like the comparison to cotton candy. We have one of our friends who we brought onto the podcast, Dylan, who I've been following him for a long time, and he uses the term potato chip books because they're just.
That's my other analogy is cheese and crackers. I'm there's whole meals and then there's cheese and crackers books.
Oh, I love that.
Yes,
that's so much fun.
I love these food analogies. I've yet to make my own.
Food and books go really well together.
That we do.
Next question, and it's very specific to because I am a writer as well, and I'm always nosy to know other writers' routines to see if I'm a legitimate writer or if I'm doing it all wrong. So, what's a non-negotiable element in your writing routine, or if do you have a writing routine?
I mean, when I was writing For Whom the Bell Tolls, it was kind of chaotic because I would write a chapter in a day, and because it was the only day I'd have like to myself, because I was either living on a sailboat and I was working through the week, or I was with my parents because I was living with them for a little bit. And it was like the one day I got left alone. So I'm kind of like Greta Garbo. I want to be left alone. I cannot write with someone over my shoulder. I've tried to go to write in coffee shops, but I just get so paranoid, like someone's reading over my shoulder and judging
Yep.
me for whatever. So if I can do it, it's not my preference. It's not like my freest creative self. And then I also like quiet.
Yeah.
Like I'll put headphones in and I listen to a lot of orchestral music, movie soundtracks, video game stuff. If it's got words in it, I'll start to type the words or I'll
Mm.
start like daydreaming off on it. But if it's just instruments, we're golden. But I can't have people like talking to me or have do anything. So I just shut the door. I'm like, I'm in solitary confinement. Nobody come around me. I'll come out of my cave back into the real world eventually. But yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
have a super strict, like, okay, I'm going to drink this tea and have this. And my desk is half the time it's super clean, half the time it's super cluttered because I'll pull books off my shelves for reference or for art or for notes or sticky, whatever. So it's chaotic a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Ooh,
I like to be left alone. I like my quiet.
I love that. Okay, that makes me feel better because
I
that's
don't think
pretty
there's
much.
anything such a thing as a real writer or not, because like all of our processes are so different. So
Yeah.
different.
I guess I'm just hung up on, I always read about Stephen King and like his
Hmm.
writing routine, and he's doing like he'll literally write for 8 hours a day like it's a, whatever, like a 9 to 5 job. And
Yeah.
then I think about myself and how, after maybe an hour I'm maxed out. I'm like I can't remember what words are. So then I always
So you're a
but
sprinter.
through
It's
asking
yeah.
exact I just learned that term. Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's like, hey, it's like the Olympics. We've got distance athletes, we've got sprinters.
hmm
There's no right or wrong way to do it. You just gotta write. There's a pun in there somewhere, but I can't come up with it at the moment.
Cool. Well, on the same note, I guess, do you have a favorite spot to write? I know you said you love your quiet, so I'm assuming it's
Yeah.
somewhere, obviously, where there aren't any people to disrupt you. But is
Yeah.
there like one favorite spot or just anywhere where you can get in the zone with quiet will work?
I have always been very protective of my desk, like where my desk is, because when I was living with my parents, I had a little sit stand desk like tucked in the tiniest corner. So it was like you have to sidle around like three bookshelves and like two walls to settle in. But once you were in there, it was like you were locked in your little cubicle, and I had a window and everything. It was great. So I'm very protective of like my desk space, and I like to have my big monitor so I can split my screen and have research, and I've got a double thing so I can have references and whatever I'm working on. So I really like being at my desk, my zone, my writing stuff, so I can go, okay, there's snacks over here. The bathroom is right there. I don't have to foray out and go do a whole lot, but I'm kind of a homebody in that sense.
Yep, I can totally relate to that. I mean, like this is my safe space. My office is like, yeah, it's my reading, I have my couch to read and everything. But it's also just like if I need to work, it has to be right here in this spot with all of these specific things, or else I can't get like in the work mode.
Yeah.
So I can empathize with that.
Because I will squirrel off. Like I've tried, I'm like, I'm gonna go sit on the couch or whatever, and then I end up sitting like a pretzel, which isn't great for my back. And then I'm like, oh, I could watch the birds, or oh, the neighbor's cat is out on their patio, and oh, look at that, I could watch TV. It's like, oh, I haven't read that book. I should probably pick that. So I need to be in my
Yeah.
no visual distractions in front of me. They can be behind me, that's fine, but like in front of me, I'm like purely computer and my pushpin board. That's it.
Okay, that's great. And one more question, and we'll get into the actual interview. Do you have a favorite book of all time, or one that specifically made you become a reader, want to write your own books? Any one of those.
I mean, we could blame my dad for this one because he was just like, I don't want to do children's books, so we're going to start you with Fellowship of the Ring at like 5 years old. So that was my first kind of, other than baby books, like bedtime story. So, and then I kind of like got a hold of his bookshelves, and it's like, once I figured out to read, I'm like, do I understand half the things I'm reading about in Dune? No, but I know that I'm having a good time.
Mm.
So probably Lord of the Rings was my biggest and like my first. So they have a very near and dear space in my heart. Did I understand them completely at the tender age of 5? No. But I've always loved just like fantasy books, and Aragon was one of my gateway
Oh my
Mm,
God,
kind of
yeah.
fantasy
same.
things, and that was fun to go along with that whole series. And there was a couple of other ones that came out around that time, so it was a good age for like young fantasy. And then when I was like mid high school and college, I pretty much stopped reading and writing completely. And it was a random, um, I think it was fan art on Pinterest in 2019 for a book that I was like, oh, I could try reading that. I haven't read a book in like 3 years since I graduated college. Like, sure, I could give this a go. And it just lit it off. And
Yep.
I just was inhaling books. And then the pandemic happened, and I was like, well, I
Mhm.
have nothing to do but read.
Yeah.
So I just inhaled a concerning amount of books. And then Hell's Bell started, and it was all off to the creative races from there.
Oh, I
Wow,
love
the
that.
last episode we talked about, she was a fan artist. Is that what you call them? Someone who draws fan art.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can. I think that's a pretty good one.
Fan artist, or I
Yeah.
don't, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's cool. I love and in her most recent book, she's like incorporating her own illustrations into her
That's
book.
awesome.
So
Hmm.
I'm loving this revival of fan art and the power of it. I
Oh
think
yeah,
that's
all hell fan
really
art.
interesting. Yeah.
It's just, especially on Pinterest, it's like sometimes you got to be careful because you don't want to get any spoilers. But at the
That was
same
the thing,
time,
was that I later realized that the fan art I saw was a massive spoiler for the whole, because
oh
I was
god,
serious, like reading the books, and I'm like, who the heck is this guy? When's he's coming? Why am I reading about a bunch of blondes? What's going on? Where's the white hair?
oh I love that. Yeah, we got fan art. Honestly, has been like the same way that like specific quotes is often like a selling
Mm-hmm.
point for like people to just start reading a book. I feel like fan art just has
Yeah.
the exact same power.
Oh yeah.
Um, Okay, so we're going to get into the more book specific questions. And the first one, well, book and you specific questions. And the first one is obviously, I want to know about your journey to like publishing For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Oh boy.
Yeah, because okay, when I read your sort of like author biography, I was like, oh my gosh, I get to meet this person. So from living aboard a 35-foot sailboat for 8 years to finding success with Hell's Bells, your journey as a content creator, and just now having your book published. Please tell us more about it. It sounds crazy, and I want to hear every
Because see,
little.
the funny thing is, I think of myself as a pretty boring person. I'm like, oh, I haven't had a really interesting life, and then it'll be things like that, and I'll be like, oh yeah, no, I have done some kind of interesting stuff. I guess it's like I'm a homebody, but I kind of do interesting stuff. So the sailboat is like a whole life story. I mean, that's the SEA in my name, is because of my sailor dad. So he lived on his sailboat for 14 years, sailing around. He lived in Hawaii, and he was on Washington coast, down in Hawaii. He sailed again California and Mexico and all that stuff. But that's where he met my mom, was when he was living aboard a sailboat in Hawaii. And then when they got together and my mom was pregnant with me, he came up with my name while he was on watch, because he worked on towboats over there, inter island towboats. So that's where the C in my name comes from. And
Wow.
then they sailed from Hawaii to Astoria, Oregon, where I grew up, with me when I was 13 months old. So that was my ocean crossing. And we just found the videos of that not that long ago, actually. So boats have been in my life forever. And then he sold his boat, but we were on and around them, and we were friends with the people who bought it. So I grew up spending summers out there and sailing the San Juan Islands. So I had the gift of being bored a lot as a kid, but in an interesting place, like in an
Mhm.
interesting way. So I would, read whatever I could. And then they had the little free libraries on the island, and you would pick up random books. And it was a great place to kind of develop creativity being on a boat as a kid. So I always had the boat bug.
Hmm.
And then senior year of college, we found a boat that I was kind of looking at. It was one of my dad's students, because he's a teacher, was selling it. And that didn't work out. So then I looked at the boat two slips next to it, which I was like, oh, this is kind of pretty, but like I'm interested in it. So then I met with the guy, ended up buying it because it had sat abandoned for like several years, and it was the cheapest rent in town. So that was where I was going to live. So I fixed it up with the help of my parents and moved aboard, and that was kind of my saga. And I was in the Columbia River for several years, and then sailed up to Anacortes, Washington, and we did the San Juans. We would sail up into Canada and all that stuff. So that was where I was when Hell's Bells got started. So in a lot of the earlier episodes, you can hear seagulls and halyards and windstorms and waves. So I'm like, it's very nautical in hell, at least for a certain period of time. So that was kind of the big defining thing of my 20s because I bought it right before I turned 22 and I sold it just before I turned 29. So that was the big chunk of my 20s. And a lot of Hell's Bells was filmed there. And I wrote the first chapter of the book sitting at the chart table on a really rainy day because I was just like, I don't want to go outside. You have to walk, all the way up the dock and you get soaked to get up to your car. So I was like, I'm not going anywhere. It's Saturday. I'm just going to I've got this idea. I think I'm just going to throw it out there. This isn't going to go far. This isn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
What a
And then
core
it did.
memory. That's incredible.
Yeah. But the publishing, it was kind of like the series. It wasn't supposed to go anywhere. And I was like, I'll just write it chapter by chapter, put it out on Patreon because this will be fun. And then I eventually realized, like, oh, I could self-publish this because I looked up, what is a first author? Like, what an agent? Like, what would that do to pursue? And it was 90,000 words, they were saying, for a fantasy first-time novel. And I did a word count, and I was at 200,200 words was what the first draft capped out at. And I went, I think I'll just do this my way. I'll just self-pub it. I don't want to deal with all the rejection and butchering it and cutting it in half and all this other stuff. So I just went, oh, I'll self-pub it. And I took a year to crash course learn, how to hire an editor. What's a developmental edit? What's a line edit? Who's a copy edit? Let me get the cover done. And I fully anticipated just self-pubbing it and letting it be kind of what it was and having my own little self-pub journey. And that was as far as it was going to go. But when I got the pre-orders put up, I started getting some emails. Like, that was right before Christmas. And I started getting some emails from like editors. And Amy and I have a mutual friend through Mama Cusses, Gwenna, on TikTok. And Gwenna was like, oh, let me just send this to her, like, just because I think she'll enjoy it. And Amy then jumped in and she's like, let me just help you get an audiobook deal. Because that was the whole thing. And then it snowballed into, what was it, an 11-way auction, I think, that we ended up with. So the first few weeks of January were insane because I was kind of like, oh, I'll publish the book on New Year's Eve of 2023. That's when the ebook is coming out. And then I'll be off. I'll take a break for a month. I'll just, do nothing. And I don't think that's happened yet. So I got to meet some incredible industry people and it was kind of insane. And I was like, okay, how does this hardcover thing work? How does audiobooks work? So I got to ask, and I'm still asking a lot of questions that I'm sure are very silly for people who've been in the industry forever. But have spent, 3 years going, oh, it'll just be a self-pub, a little indie pub, it'll be great. And now it's, oh no, here's how marketing works.
You have to start somewhere, so ask all the questions, and it looks like you're doing really well so far. So,
Fingers crossed, we hope.
yeah. I mean, 11, you said 11 publisher.
I think that's what it was I think when we first started it, it was like an 11-way auction.
Wow. That is
And it
so
was
impressive, and you should be proud of that. Yeah.
Well, I kept texting my agent. I'm like, this doesn't feel normal. Is this normal? And she's like, no, like this is okay. You can feel a little weird about this. Like, this is, no. And I was like, okay, so how common is this? Is this weird? Like, this was questions about just like basic, is this number of emails in a day standard? Like, I had no idea because I'd been self-employed for so many years. I'm like, suddenly my email's full of people and I'm going, should I be worried? Am I in trouble? What's going on?
My goodness.
So, I mean, now for anyone who's never heard of the book or is interested in fantasy but wants to know more, could you describe it? Do you have your spiel about what your book is, like your summary that you tell people?
So it is a fantasy romance romantasy set in the afterlife, and it's actually set especially at the customer service desk in hell. It follows Lily, who has recently passed away, and she's worked in customer service her whole life. So she finds herself down in hell, and she gets into the whole operations of it, and she happens to meet a demon prince and a general, Belle, and they start a little friendship with some chemistry, and she starts learning about the afterlife and how it is nothing like what she expected it to be, and it just keeps going from there, and it's a rollicking good time. There are many puns.
That sounds right up my alley. I'm so
I
excited.
was just like, you know what? I've got a lifetime of dad jokes on hand, ready to go.
Put
Someone's
them
going to hear
in,
them.
yeah.
Oh, I love that. And I guess you did sort of skim over this when you were talking about, your journey as a whole earlier. But what exactly sparked the flame to start writing this specific story? Where did like the inspiration come from? Where did the idea come from? Um, yeah, and I know you'd mentioned something about the French word for beautiful, Belle, and how that
Yeah.
sort of made its way into your story. So would love to know all about the info about that.
Yeah, so it started really with the TikTok series
Hmm.
for Hell's Bells, which again was supposed to be like 5 episodes and go nowhere. And I think we're at 630 almost now, 4 years later. So that had been going for a few months. I think it was about 6 months in, 7 months in. It was a really rainy day, so it might have been spring in like 2022. And I think I wrote that first chapter and I just held on to it because it kind of jumped into my head because I was thinking, well, how would the help desk have gotten started? Because so much of the TikTok series was completely off the cuff. I've never had a script for it. So I would just make stuff up and be like, okay, world building doesn't matter, but this is what I need to be true for this punchline to land. So here we go.
Mhm.
So I wanted to go back and kind of, how does the world actually work? Like
Hmm.
create it with intention. And how did this all get started? Who is Lily? Because she was clearly like the mom of the desk. And it just, that first scene, that first chapter just kind of popped into my head when I was like, hey, well, how did Lily get here? And it was that first chapter just popped so vividly in my head. I wrote it in probably 30 minutes.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm just going to let that sit for a while. This will be fun. It'll be a writing project for me. And I held on to it for a while. Then I got my Patreon, kind of started picking up, and I went, oh, I've got to give them something. And someone said, you should write a book. And I went, I really shouldn't because I haven't written anything meaningful since I was 14 years old. So here's my example of like what my writing is like now. If you want me to write more, I will. But I was fully expecting to just get roasted. And everyone just went, more, please. So I kind of had the confidence to like keep going and post more of what I had. And then I was, 2 or 3 chapters in, and I was like, no, this is going to be more than like a 10 chapter story.
Yeah.
It's going to keep going. And it did. So it was kind of a mishmash of, I'd been inspired by various things, but it was just the gift of being bored on a boat and having this pre-existing series that I'd already spent so much time with in my head on TikTok, and they just kind of mishmashed together. And I went, oh no, this is a good thing. Like I could start here, and then it was just the question of, but where do we go from here? And I was curious enough to pursue that to the end, but it was a combination of boredom and a pre-existing TikTok series.
That's amazing. And it's so interesting that now, I mean, I've heard this with other authors who were also content creators. The idea of being able to write sort of alongside your community and them sort of, helping you through it, giving you inspiration, even I've heard. It's just such a, I don't know, I think writing can be a very solitary act. So to have that community while you're writing, it must, I don't know, build confidence and just build inspiration. But that's not even my question. Just an interesting
It is
note.
fun. I will
Yeah.
say, like, that was what I would look forward to every week. Like, even if it was a chapter I wasn't feeling great about, I knew that there was going to be people, like, in all caps in the comments. And that's how I started probably thriving off of, like, readers' tears and stress. Because I would leave it on a cliffhanger and I would only post one chapter a week. And I was like, I don't think this was even a good chapter, but that's got a decent cliffhanger in it. And it would just, my entire comment section would just be, please write more tomorrow, please. Like, I'll send you my firstborn. What do you need? And I was just like, yes, you're paying. Okay. That makes me want to write even more. So it is fun to have that. And it was kind of like having this really distant writers group
Mhm.
where you would always be getting feedback too on like, hey, this is what I think is happening. So you could see people trying to piece together plot twists or ideas or, doing it in real time. So it was fun to have that. And it gave me an incentive to, you have to write every week. Like you
Yeah.
have to make time to write every week. So it kind of helped me form that habit. But yeah, it can be nice.
And before you touched on your world building and how with your TikToks, you didn't really consider that, but now that you're writing a full novel, you have to. So, obviously the afterlife is a known thing by everyone, but but everyone has their own interpretations of it. So, what did the research for you look like when you knew you wanted to set this story in the afterlife? Was there any research? Was it just your
There was a
imagination?
lot. There was a lot of research, and it was because I didn't want to just blanket offend or write, anyone off, because there's so many different religions and faiths throughout history all around the world. And I was like, who am I to say that, one is right or superior or better or anything else? So I did a lot of research to be like, okay, what jokes can I make that are appropriate, but that would still be funny even to people of those faiths? So it's like, even in the video series, like we've had a joke where it's like, oh, everyone's showing up, but Muhammad can't make an appearance, unfortunately, because you can't show the Prophet Muhammad. So it was just kind of, okay, how can we still have comedy and poke fun without it being just blanketly offensive?
Mhm.
And then it was also fun to be like, okay, how could this all stitch together? How could they all live alongside each other? Because everyone's represented in the afterlife, and then there's some stuff that we don't even know about yet, too. Like we've got the Fae and all that fun stuff. So it was like, okay, who would talk? Who might have beef? What are some foods or music or traditions that we might want to incorporate? What do the different afterlives for different religions or different faiths or different people groups look like that are lesser known? How could we incorporate them? So I did a lot of research on that kind of stuff. I mean, I was doing research all the time. Most of my week was research, and then Saturday was my writing day. So I've got way too many notes about way too many things.
Well, that sounds so interesting. I'm curious what exactly, like, not just with your actual novel, but with the series on TikTok, what piqued your interest to sort of focus on the afterlife specifically? What, where did that come from?
So I grew up pretty religious. It was like a non-denominational Christian, but we were like very traditional, like non-denom. And that had an effect. And I'd left that community by the time, COVID hit.
Yeah.
And I was also working a few jobs, one of which was at Joanne Fabrics. So rest in peace, Joanne's. Um, but I was working there one Sunday, and a lady just came in and went off on me for something. And I'd been doing all this deconstructing, and she was just screaming. And I was like, I just want you to be wrong. Because she asked me if we had something, and I was like, no, we don't have this. She goes, well, I know you have to have it. I'm going to go do this. And when she was done yelling at me, she went and found my manager. And I was just like, I just want to be able to say no to a customer and have that stand. Like, I want the customer to be wrong and know that they're wrong.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, where would this happen? Because I had just started, I was kind of messing around on TikTok with like random skits and stuff. And I was like, how could this happen? Where would they be wrong? Hell, people who get sent to hell would always be wrong. And had been deconstructing the religion and everything. That's where that kind of came from. And I went, oh yeah, customer service desk in hell. There's comedy there. I can do that. So it was one wrong lady yelled at me in a Joann's on a Sunday.
Wow.
And from that, all of this stemmed.
Wow. That's so interesting. And I guess continuing on that, I mean, you kind of answered it because hell is, like in terms of, novels and stuff, it can be more on the fantasy side. But what made you want to really go deep into it and write something that's entirely fantasy or romantasy? I mean, it could have been magical realism, but I mean, other than how amazing romantasy is, it's a great genre.
Yeah,
Is there
it's
a
clearly
reason?
one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I think because it was when I was thinking about the world of, what Hell's Bells would be, what For Whom the Bell Tolls would be, it started to feel more fantasy because I didn't want it to just be like the strict religious version of hell. That was part of why I set it in hell too, was
Hmm.
to cure my own trauma. Like I was like, I've been threatened with this my whole life. What if it's not what we've been told? I wanted to kind of flip stuff on its head and see, like flip stuff over and see what came out of it. So that was I was like, what if hell wasn't just eternal suffering for no reason? What if there was slightly more of a purpose or thought or anything behind it? So that really fed into where I wanted to make it fantasy. But then I was also like, we all like wings on our boys.
Mhm.
Like who among us doesn't like them tall and with wings? And it just seemed like such a fantastical world if everything, all the religions and all that magic and everything that we've kind of dreamed about as humans is true or real in some way. That's fantasy.
Hmm.
Like you could have like a fairy with a cell phone, but yeah, there's got to be magic in there somewhere.
That's great. And so you mentioned that you used to release chapter by chapter when you were writing this uh, self-published, and then when you moved to traditional publishing, how did you, was there a difference in those processes? Like I know like you'll send your edits in and then they'll send their edits in, versus you, it was just you when it was self-published. So how has it been collaborating with other people?
I did have a few editors, like I hired people to work with, so I'd been working with other people that I'd found to get edits and stuff done beforehand. But it's wild to have a team.
Hmm.
Like that's probably the craziest thing for me going from self-pub to having a publishing team is it's like I can go to sleep and stuff is still getting done.
Hmm.
Whereas before, if I wasn't doing it, nothing was getting done. And that was a whole level of stress. Like I didn't write for a solid year. That year that I was editing and doing everything for Whom the Bell Tolls, I didn't write a whole lot of new stuff because I was so consumed with taking care of this one book. I think I read For Whom the Bell Tolls like 13 times
Yeah.
end to end with all the rewrites in one year. So you'd think I'd have a more encyclopedic, oh yeah, on this page, this is what happens, but we're not there yet. My brain started to purge it already. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, it's just having the help has been fantastic. I'm so sorry, I completely lost the plot on that question. I didn't have enough coffee that this morning.
No, that you answered it perfectly. I think that was great.
Awesome. My next question, I have two before we like wrap up, but the next one is, do you have anything currently in the works that we can anticipate?
So I have a 3 book deal for the Hell's Bells series. So I have started working on book 2. I've put a little bit of a pause on that as we're coming to like crunch time for the book release, for the paperback book release. But I do have book 2 in the works, and then I have a couple of other projects that I've been kicking around, one of which for about 15 years that I finally feel like I've kind of come into maturity and confidence to start digging into, but that's going to have to go on a back burner until
Mm.
my obligations are fulfilled a little bit, but I definitely have it. I've been doing research for it and stuff on the side. Like there's a map on my bulletin board behind the camera here that I drew when I was 16.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And it's been bouncing around in the bottom of every purse and the, footwell of every car I've had since then. But it's this ratty little map, and I'm like, no, this will come in handy someday. I should probably keep holding on to that. So I do have other ideas for non Hell's Bells related things, but I do have book 2 in the works.
That's
That is
exciting.
so
Do you think
cool.
that the map that you currently have right now is going to make its way into like the actual physical book?
Oh God, I hope it's a way more refined version. Because I just found the map that I sent to my map maker, and I can't draw. I can barely write. I have some of the worst penmanship you've ever seen in your life, and I cannot draw at all. So I found the map that I sent him, and then he made it into this beautiful, the maps that are in the book now. But I was just like, yeah, this thing can't ever see the light of day. It's so bad. It's like on the back of a napkin. But maybe I'll laminate it and keep it in the archives.
Yeah,
Some version of it, I'm sure, will make it in if that one gets to see the light of day, if that project gets out there.
that is so cool. Childhood dreams, like being able to fulfill them as an adult
Yeah.
is, I
Oh
love
my
that.
gosh. Well, it's like my birthday is coming up this Saturday on the 3rd, and I keep going like, okay, I turned 30. 15 years ago, I was a night and day different. Like, she
Hmm.
wouldn't know what's going on. She had to have no idea. She wouldn't believe a word out of my mouth if I told her what the last 15 years has looked like.
That must feel so rewarding. I mean, just to think back on like, I know there's often like these exercises of talking to your childhood self and just really helping yourself, you know, realize how far you've come. Because it's so easy to say, like, oh yeah, I haven't done that much, I haven't grown that much. But then if you actually think back on talking to like your 15-year-old self and saying, like, this is everything we've accomplished so far, it's absolutely crazy to think back on
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And my last question is, who would you cast as real life Lily and Belle? Do you have any people in mind?
Whenever I've thought about, like, oh, if Hell's Bells ever got turned into a show, I always kind of imagined it as like animated, like almost Legend of Vox Machina kind of
Mhm.
style. So it's like I always would think of the voices, and not so much the faces, because Belle is a 7 foot tall, horned, winged demon with one of the hottest voices in existence, and he's got like dark purple gray skin. That's kind of hard to cast off of a human man.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think of them as animated. I think the voices for the audiobook, Elena Wolf and Sean Masters, I heard them and I immediately went, that's my Lily and that's my Belle. So those voices nailed it. But in terms of people, I don't know. I always kind of imagine Belle as someone kind of like ruggedy, like that almost like Jason Momoa, Roman Reigns kind of style, that kind of vibe, but slightly more himbo-y. Like just like take that and make them a, green flag all across the board and then give them horns, wings, and a tail. You're there.
Amazing.
Lily is a little harder to cast because I just haven't thought about it actively too much, because then I get into the weeds of redhead actresses and who's a real redhead and who isn't. And I'm a natural redhead and I take that real personally. So it was, I was like, I'm from a family of redheads where we all feel a little too strongly about that. But I haven't gotten too much into that one, unfortunately. Because I'm like, okay, do I cast her as young? Do I cast her as older? What age range do we go with? So I don't have any good answers on that one. Could give you the voices, though.
I'm excited for the audiobook now.
Me too.
Can't wait to hear
Yeah.
it.
Oh, you should hear. They both do a fantastic job, but Belle's voice.
Okay.
Yeah.
I heard him and I went,
Well, I need
yeah,
to
you
know.
feel that in your chest.
Definitely going to be reading the audiobook then.
Yeah.
Well, I think that brings us to the end already. I can't believe how quickly that passed by. But thank you so much for answering all our questions.
Yeah.
We're beyond excited for this release. I honestly, like I said, can't wait for the audiobook. I feel like I'm gonna have these on 24/7 once I have it.
And it is almost 24 hours, I will say.
Amazing. I can spend an entire day just listening to these amazing voices. That sounds like a great day to me. And for all our listeners, they can go and find you at See You Later on TikTok and Jaysea You Later on YouTube. That's right. And Instagram?
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Great.
And yeah, make sure you check those channels out. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on @GetFable on TikTok or @Fable on Instagram for more bookish content.
Amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on the Book Nook.